Hello, I'm going to be talking about a real horror story. A seriously real horror story. Something that could happen to any human being in Britain, and something that should call us all to think about what we call civilization. And it's about a man who was arrested for an offence he did not commit and spent 17 years in jail when the authorities knew that he was perfectly innocent. We've seen this before, of course, with somebody like Tony Randall, but in his case, an argument could be made for the arrest. It was a very thin loophole, but it was a loophole that the law managed to push itself through. So I'm not saying that Mr. Robinson deserved to be arrested, by the way. I'm just saying that the law stretched itself to limits that it should not have done. But it could do that. In this case, the law knew it was wrong. In fact, it actually cooked up the charges. I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to tell you I'm granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. All the links are in the description, as are links for donation sites. If you want to use any of them, that would be lovely, of course. I always appreciate that. But really, the important thing is to click the like button, because that apparently increases the distribution of the video. All right. So yeah, like, share and subscribe. And all the links, as I said, are in the description. Now, let's talk about Andrew Malkinson. He spent 17 years in jail because the police withheld information at the trial, and so the jury found him guilty. Now, anyone who's still alive of that jury, can you imagine how they feel? It's not only the man himself who's been affected by this. It's the children he never had. It's the friends he never made. It's the waste of his mother's life as she desperately tried to hold her faith in her son who'd been found guilty of an awful crime. It's all sorts of people who are affected by this. And I have to tell you, I do not understand why the police did this. I mean, I actually don't understand what they thought they were accomplishing and how they could even sleep at night knowing what they'd done. I'm having trouble understanding that. Well, not trouble. I cannot understand it. It's beyond my understanding. And I spent a lot of time as a writer, which means I've spent a lot of time putting myself into other people's shoes. That's what writers do. That's completely unknown territory to me. So, he look at this. He was found guilty of I have to be careful with words here. Interfering with a woman in Greater Manchester in 2003, and the following year he was jailed for life with a minimum term of 7 years. So he could have got out after 7 years with good behaviour, but he maintained his innocence, and so he got an extra 10 years. That's something else maybe we should be looking at. At the time of Mr. Malkinson's trial, there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime. There was absolutely nothing on the woman. And the victim herself said it wasn't him, because she said she'd scratched her attacker's face, and it was plainly obvious that Mr. Malkinson had no wounds to his face. There were photos of that when he was arrested. Perfectly unscratched face. And the police kept those photos out of the evidence. Physically, it's not like somebody was a bit incompetent and didn't put it forward. They actually made the effort to withhold the photographs. So the prosecution evidence was based on identification from two people who had been in trouble with the police. Now, I haven't seen it written anywhere, but it seems to me that it's very likely that the police told these guys what to say. And that meant, in a sort of deal, we won't bother you about this if you go into court and say that. Something like that. I don't know, I haven't seen that written down, but it looks to me like that's what must have happened. Edward Henry KC for Mr. Malkinson previously described these as deplorable disclosure failures, which mostly lay at the door of the Greater Manchester Police. Now, the Greater Manchester Police already have a record of lying about people. The Greater Manchester Police were the ones who'd lied about the Hillsborough disaster. They said that the fans were responsible for what happened. But at least to a certain extent you can understand that, because it was the behaviour of the police that had caused the crush. So they were trying to exonerate themselves. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying I could understand why a person with a tenuous grasp of the truth might do that. And as a matter of fact here, a former detective with a corruption conviction has revealed how colleagues used to call him Enid Blyton. If you don't know, she was a children's story writer, wrote lots of books, because of the fictitious crime reports he created. Stephen Hayes had worked in the Manchester Police throughout the 60s and 70s and said the brutality and sleaze he saw made TV drama Life on Mars look like a sitcom. So there's something that's been going on in Greater Manchester Police for a very long time. But to have got to so it probably started with, it must have started with a little bit of corruption, and then it ended up with them actually working to convict an innocent man. Why would they do that? Okay, overturning Mr. Malkinson's convictions for 2 counts of, and 1 of choking or strangling with intent to commit. Lord Justice Holroyd said he could leave the court free and no longer be subject to the conditions of licence. Remember, once you've been convicted of a crime involving that sort of behaviour, you are, after that, on a list of possible future offenders. He said, in the very particular circumstances of this case, the non-disclosure of the 2 relevant photographs prevented the appellant from putting his case forward in its best light and strengthened the prosecution case against him in a manner which the photographs show to have been mistaken. So he was released a couple of years ago, but he was, having got out, he then found an organisation that was prepared to do some investigating for him. And he spent an extra 10 years in jail because he refused to give way and say throw his hands up and say he was guilty when he knew he was not. Lord Justice Holroyd said, the stark reality is that the appellant has spent very many years in prison, having been convicted on identification evidence which he always disputed and which cannot now be regarded as providing a safe basis for the jury's verdicts. We regret that this court cannot alter that fact. No, they can't give him his 20 years back. And the tragedy might continue because, well, the state might stump up £1 million for him for the time he spent in jail. It could be as much as that. But when somebody has been in jail for 17 years and is suddenly handed £1 million, he's very likely to misspend it. I mean, people who are living ordinary lives who win £1 million on the lottery end up misspending it. This could end up much worse. The money could end up destroying him. The whole thing is just too awful for words. This is what Mr. Malkinson said. I feel vindicated by the court's finding that the Greater Manchester Police unlawfully withheld evidence denying me a fair trial. The evidence needed to overturn my conviction has been sitting in the police files for the past 2 decades. Yet the Criminal Cases Review Commission did not bother to look, and it fell to the small charity Appeal to bring it to light. So it wasn't just the police. The whole machinery of government was just colluding. Mr. Malkinson asked for the CCRC's chair, Helen Pitcher, to apologise and take accountability for the CCRC's failures, which cost me extra years behind bars for a crime I did not commit. He added, I want politicians to give people seeking to prove their innocence a right to access the evidence of their case. I didn't know that they couldn't access the evidence. Of course they should be able to do that. Since the police and CCRC have proved they cannot be trusted. Well, certainly Greater Manchester Police cannot be trusted. And in my opinion, it's not just a matter of giving this poor fellow some money. Here, take the money, shut up, go away. It's arresting the officers who suppress the evidence. They should be arrested. They colluded in a terrible crime. If they had colluded to murder him, or if they'd colluded in locking him up in a cellar for 17 years, they would be arrested. Why should this be any different? And here we have the photo fit, that the victim's description of her attacker. And here we have a photograph of Mr. Malkinson taken. This is the mugshot. That's showing a completely clean face, by the way. I mean, is there any resemblance at all between these two people? I don't see anything. The victim, it says here, pulled him out of an identity parade, as I said before. The victim actually then said that she had wounded her attacker. And it's quite obvious that this guy is not wounded. So it says here, a key part of his appeal hinged on the fact that both witnesses had long criminal histories. One had been arrested on the night he claimed to have seen Andy. The most likely next step is a claim to the Ministry of Justice. The maximum amount of compensation payable under the Miscarriage of Justice Compensation Scheme is £1 million for 10 or more years imprisonment. Yeah, well, £1 million is very nice. I'm not sure it's going to do him that much good, though, poor fellow. I mean, he's been in jail for 17 years. And as I say, I just cannot understand what those police thought they were doing. How this benefited them. I have no idea. How they could live with themselves. And that poor jury, they found him guilty. Now they know what they were forced to collude in. This is going to follow them too, These things never hit just one person. It's a terrible thing. Well, look, misidentification happens, miscarriages of justice happen. Yeah, that's right, that does. But this was not a miscarriage of justice. This was actually a murder. There has to be a mechanism for checking on the police and all the government authorities. The reason why Appeal found the evidence when the CCRC didn't, it's just because they're all in it together, aren't they? And that's inevitable. That happens all the time when people get to know each other and then they don't like to rock the boat and all that sort of thing. That happens all the time. So you can understand why that happens. And what you've got to do is find a way for some group that is not involved with the police in any way to give oversight. Okay, well, I had to talk about this one. Right, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.